powerful sense of relief after the man who killed George Floyd was found guilty of murder. The crowds outside the Minneapolis courthouse celebrating the verdict with cheers, many in the crowd carrying signs with the words guilty and justice. The emotion clear on the faces of those who gathered, many embracing as the verdict, seen widely as a watershed moment for American justice, was handed down. But as the guilty charges were read out, no emotion from former policeman Derek Chauvin, who's now a convicted murderer. Well, a makeshift shrine has grown over the course of the day at the very spot George Floyd was killed, outside a convenience store. People adding signs, candles and other items calling for change. With today's events, here's our US correspondent, Anna Burns-Francis.
For one moment, a courthouse, a city, a nation turned its attention to one man.
We, the jury, in the above entitled matter, find the defendant guilty, find the defendant guilty, find the defendant guilty.
Second and third degree murder and second degree manslaughter. As the verdicts were read out, former police officer Derek Chauvin barely moved. But outside, the crowds gathered in the streets of Minneapolis erupted into cheers and chants. The jury, black, white, men and women, had deliberated for a little more than 10 hours.
I have to thank you on behalf of the people of the state of Minnesota for not only jury service, but heavy-duty jury service.
George Floyd's family were elated and relieved.
I could do nothing but watch, especially in that courtroom, over and over and over again, if my brother was murdered. I'm not just fighting for George anymore, I'm fighting for everybody around this world. Today, we are able to breathe again.
But perhaps the one person who changed the course of history in this case more than any other was Daniela Fraser, a 17-year-old girl who stood and silently filmed Derek Chauvin kneeling on George Floyd's neck until he died.
I cannot breathe.
The case pushed the Black Lives Matter movement into the consciousness of all Americans and became a political lightning rod for reform. The president making a phone call to Floyd's family today, promising change.
We're gonna hold you to that, President Biden.
Former President Barack Obama and his wife Michelle releasing a statement urging Americans not to rest in the fight for equality.
And this is an assurance to them that if we don't give up, that we can win some rounds. But the war and the fight is not over.
I would not call today's verdict justice, however, because justice implies true restoration. But it is accountability.
This is the first time Minneapolis has convicted a white policeman of killing a black man. The fear of many is that it won't be the last.
And Anna's joining us now from New York. We saw him led away in handcuffs, Anna. So where is Derek Chauvin now?
Simon, Derek Chauvin has been moved to a Minnesota correctional facility. He will be sentenced in around 8 weeks' time. Now, state laws vary between where you are and in Minnesota. In Minneapolis, the guidelines state that you'll only be sentenced on the harshest of your convictions. So for Derek Chauvin, that's second-degree murder, and with a maximum sentence of 40 years. But under state guidelines, that could be reduced to something as low as 12 and a half years. Although in this case, prosecutors can ask for that to be weighted more heavily, given the cruel and unusual punishment that Derek Chauvin inflicted on George Floyd.
To the bigger picture, this is a big win in the fight against what many claim is systemic racism. A long way to go, though.
There sure is, and many would have been hoping that this was the start of something different, but before that verdict was even read out, there was another fatal police shooting, this time a 15-year-old girl, Micaiah Bryant, in Ohio. Unusually, police have released the body cam of that incident from the policeman involved in that shooting quite quickly. It's already out, and her family says that while she was holding a knife, she dropped it before she was shot 4 times. Before the body cam was even released, though, protesters and demonstrators had already taken to the streets demanding no justice, no peace. So many people would have hoped that today's verdict against Derek Chauvin would have been the start of some police reform, but it just goes to show that there will still be, as there have been throughout this trial, shootings by white police officers against black people. There is a long way to go.
Kia ora, Anna. Live from New York, Anna Burns-Francis. George Floyd's death didn't start the Black Lives Matter movement, but it reignited simmering tension over racial injustice in many countries, including our own. Here's Kristen Hall with George Floyd's legacy.
A brutal murder caught on camera and shared around the world.
في ملابسات وفاة جورج فلويد.
George Floyd repeatedly told the officers that he could not breathe.
Outrage soon followed, protests spreading far beyond Minneapolis, where George Floyd was murdered. Police clashed with demonstrators in London. Gatherings were held from Berlin to Syria. Despite COVID-19 restrictions, thousands showed up to march in our biggest cities too.
Have difficult and uncomfortable conversations with your whānau and friends. Call out your racist nana.
Floyd's death sparked a global race reckoning and a conversation about how historical figures deserve to be remembered. Statues of slave traders and colonisers were forcibly toppled in the US and the UK. Back here, the Hamilton City Council removed a statue of Colonial Navy Commander John Hamilton before local kaumātua Taitimu Maipi could do it himself.
So I had a bigger hammer to take to the statue tomorrow, actually.
Parallels were drawn between police brutality in America and the treatment of Indigenous Australians. David Dungay was killed after being held down by prison guards in 2015. His last words, "I can't breathe." And there's still a long way to go. Controversies swirling around a British report commissioned in the wake of George Floyd's murder, which found no evidence of institutional racism in areas like policing.
It is reprehensible, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I hope the Minister will reject it.
The lawyer for the Floyd family acknowledging that out of tragedy has come a defining moment in history.
This is a victory for those who champion humanity over inhumanity.
And President Joe Biden, who was told by Floyd's daughter after his death that her daddy changed the world. He told her today,
Daddy did change the world. Let that be his legacy.
a message of hope as America continues to grapple with racism. Kristen Hall, One News.